Hi, I'm Janet Beal for Global South Watch. I'm here interviewing Gnaka Lagoke today. He's an expert on Pan-Africanism, and we're going to talk about the recent 9th Pan-African Congress that was held in Lomé, Togo in December. Hi, Gnaka, and welcome to Global South Watch.
Yeah, thanks very much, Janet,
Okay.
for the opportunity.
I'd like to start by asking you, what was your involvement in the planning and preparation for the 9th Congress?
I had the opportunity to be introduced to the Togolese Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Robert Dussé, by Claudicia, a famous journalist who was working at RFI. And then I was invited to speak at the launching ceremony of the 9th Pan-African Congress on May the 22nd, 2023. And then I was one of the two non-state actors to have spoken about Pan-Africanism. And I presented on the anatomy of Pan-Africanism. And then in the conversation I had with the Togolese minister, then as I was talking about the All African Peoples Conference, which was organized by Kwame Nkrumah in 1958, and then he asked me if I could I can write a proposal about how I see the organization of the Non-Pan-African Congress, which I did. And then when he read it, he told me that he liked what he saw, that he agreed with me 80%, that to quote him exactly. And later on, he wanted me to be the president of the, the chairman of the scientific committee. And then so I worked as the chairman of the scientific committee for 2 years and a half. It was a position which was not remunerated, but I enjoy serving and seizing any opportunity to advance the cause of Africa and the cause of Pan-Africanism. And then this is what I did. He asked me to put together the scientific committee. In other words, I was supposed to find people who were supposed to work with me. But later on, he had a change of mind, and then I did not validate, or I did not get the opportunity to establish that scientific committee. He made me work with his staff, people who were working with him at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is what I did. So, but there were some people I was consulting. We were not organically in the scientific committee. And then, so this is how I worked. And then I put my expertise in the process. The topic of reparations, I was the one who brought it to the Non-Pan-African Congress, whose topic was to be or was on the reform of international institutions. And then I also brought the concept of Ubuntu, the Ubuntu philosophy I'm an expert of, into the project. And then so I worked on the scientific aspect of the project. I supervised the drafting of the resolutions before the Congress. And then I also worked because I was a journalist, I worked at times when it was needed on the promotion of the project. I spoke to different groups that did not want to be involved in the scientific in the Pan African Congress because of the image that is not too great about Togo as an advocate of Pan Africanism. And then I tried to rally as many people as I could. And then during the Pan African Congress in Lomé, even though I was not there, I made sure that at least 50 people of my network be in Togo. So this is what I did. And then, so in the documents, if you see something about Ubuntu, of course, it is coming from me. If you see something about reparations, of course, it is coming from me. When there was a debate, when the African Union did not want the Togolese government to organize a pre-Congress with the theme about reparation, I wrote the rebuttal, which was taken into account by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Togo, and then they sent that to the African Union, which could not continue the conversation anymore. This is how the theme of the pre-Congress of the diaspora in Brazil was on reparations. So this is some of the things that I did, and this to answer your question.
Why do you think they didn't want to hear about reparations at this Congress?
Because Ghana was given Ghana is the champion for reparation in the African Union, because one of the things many people did not know when they were talking about the Togolese event, even though it was the initiative of Togo, but it was endorsed by the African Union. So the African Union endorses different countries which want to be the leaders of different campaigns. Togo was in charge of the Non-Pan-African Congress, and Togo was in charge of the Decade of the African Roots and then African Diaspora. And then Ghana was in charge of the Conference on Reparations. So there was a big conference that took place in Ghana in November 2023. I was there. And then I spoke about Pan-Africanism, I spoke about Ubuntu, and that was the moment I promoted the concept, the Non-Pan-African Congress, because before I went to Ghana in November 2023, we heard about the Pan-African Congress. It was still at the level of some diplomatic circles. But over there, there were hundreds of representatives of the African diaspora. This is when I announced the crowd that can you hear me? Okay, I was, and this is where I announced that I was the chairman of the scientific committee, and then I could connect with many of them. So now, even before I went to Ghana, I had in the project that I sent to the minister, I had already suggested that the pre-Congress of the diaspora should be on reparations. So, but I think in the mind of the African Union, they did not want like any tension, any conflict between Ghana and Togo. So that's why they said that. But because I was in Ghana, I knew the narrative, the language that could neutralize the African Union, which I did. Because in Ghana, it was suggested that any agency that could support the project for reparation should promote the campaign for reparation. So I said in the document that doing a pre-Congress in Brazil on reparations was the continuation of one of the resolutions of the Conference on Reparation in Ghana. So, and then, so everything I'm saying, I have the documents. So that's why it was unfortunate what the Togolese minister did to make people think that, I have not done much my work. It was so, I don't want to be mean to say some bad words, but anyway, so I have all the documents.
Okay. May I ask, why did they oppose the concept of Ubuntu being discussed at the Congress?
No, they did not. No one opposed that. No one opposed. No one opposed. As because one of the things that we did too, as the chairman of the president of the scientific committee, I was in South Africa. Then I spoke there. There were some pre-congresses, 6, but I attended 3: South Africa, Mali, and Brazil. In all those 3 pre-congresses, I was. If I was not the only one, I was one of the few who spoke about the imperative of the Ubuntu philosophy to be linked to Pan-Africanism, or to be linked to the question of the 6th region or reparations. So, and then in the document, the staff of the minister, we work on that. There was no problem. The only problem that I had with them when I was talking about the content, it is about the question of the release of political prisoners in Togo. I raised that issue with the Togolese minister. Again, I have those things in writing. And then with the staff of the Togolese minister, we spoke, and then I could understand the embarrassment. And then they somehow used the diplomatic skills to dilute what I was proposing. But that issue of the release of the political prisoners, it was one of the reasons that I accepted, to work as the chairman of the scientific committee, because it is also about my principles, my name, my reputation. I cannot go and work with a government that many were decrying because of the political situation in Togo. That was one of the conversations I had with the Togolese minister to put that in document. They diluted, that element of my propositions, but still the spirit was there. And then eventually, it became a very important conversation during the Congress, and then around the Congress and after the Congress.
This helps me understand why there was so little discussion of democracy at the Congress. I was struck by the absence of discussion of democracy, and maybe it has to do with this issue around the political prisoners and your very principled stand.
Yeah, I understand, because as you know, I could not be there because the Togolese minister, because of his insecurities, and then it has, like I said, I will be talking more about that another time. I don't think it is the spirit of the video, but again, if I were around, and then because this is what I tried to do for 2 years and a half. So that at least that issue of the political prisoners is not just about Togo. This is what the people don't understand. It's not just about Togo. My idea is that because Togo took the lead to organize the Pan-African Congress, Togo should take the lead in the year of the Jubilee of Africa, 2025, or in the year of Jubilee of ECOWAS, which was created in 1975. It was going to be a good moment for the president of Togo to show to all the Pan-Africanists who were saying that Togo did not have or does not have the legitimacy to talk about Pan-Africanism, to show an act of good faith. That was my idea. But Togolese minister thought that he could do the Pan-African Congress and without addressing that issue. That was not my understanding. Some of his people were supporting that idea, but he even said, I'm talking about the minister Robert Dissé, during the opening ceremony, that everything was perfect in Togo, which was, of course, which is not true. But anyway, this is how he sees the world. So that was one of the pitfalls of the Congress in Togo.
I know you're going to be making a further elaborate comment about all this later, as you mentioned. But have you had a chance to look at any of the videos from the conference, and do you have any impressions or thoughts about how the conference itself went that you'd like to share?
The document that I got from the Togolese minister that I put together, when I was using those documents, I had suggested that after the Congress, an organization be put into place in order to execute the resolutions of the Congress. Because for me, everything has to lead to the All African People's Conference. When that conference in '58 took place, they established a permanent organization. So the conference was called the All African People Conference. The bulletin of the conference was called the All African People's Conference. The permanent organization was called the All African People Conference, that became later on a series of conferences. The second one in Tunisia in 1960, the third one in Egypt 1961. So it became later on a movement that I call the Movement of All African People Conference. So I had proposed for the Togolese Pan-African Congress that the permanent organization be called the All African People Congress, with the same acronym, AAPC, so that after the Pan-African Congress, we can talk about the All African People Conference, but in the spirit of the Pan-African Congress. This, I don't think it was in the resolution. If it was there, I have not seen it. Maybe I did not read, the final declaration properly.
It's fascinating, Gnaka. Your research into the All African Peoples Conference, it sounds like it's really, really important. And good luck with writing your book on it. And maybe you can give us another video specifically about that tradition that you're uncovering sometime. It seems really, really important. I'd also like to maybe talk to you about Ubuntu sometime.